Hey folks, my name's Kevin and it's time for a little bit more knife nerdery. Today we have another one of those tag videos. These are pretty fun for me to watch and they're honestly pretty fun to make because they make you look at your collection through a very specific lens. This one is on the top 5 user knives and it started by Alex over at the Knife Box channel. It came my way by Brad from Screamin Pirate EDC. Go watch his videos because they're amazing. It's so fun. He just has this really warm, wonderful enthusiasm and energy. I love his speaking style, and he's also the only channel I know that introduces what his mug is each day because mugs are part of his EDC, and I think that's absolutely amazing. The topic top 5 user knives have been interpreted slightly different from different folks. Some are doing like most frequently used knives. Some are like their favorite knives to use, which, you know, you might really love a knife, but the use of it doesn't come up very often, but you love it every time you do. Some people are treating it as hard use knives. I don't know. I'm of the persuasion that if you're doing anything at all with a knife that brings you joy, that counts as using it, even if you're just gazing at it or flipping around on your couch. So some of my knives are kind of in that direction, but for the most part, how I chose to interpret this is 5 knives that get a fair amount of actual cutting use. I have one honorable mention we're going to start off with, and this is the mini Griptilian in the sheep's foot blade 20CV and G10 handles. I put this as an honorable mention because it honestly gets almost no use. But the reason is because I use this for kind of harder use tasks. I just don't really have harder use tasks in my life. But because of the full liners that they introduced on this G10 version, I think they have that on the regular versions now too, but because of the strength of the lockup and because of the general like grip, this has a fantastic grip, it's called a Griptilian. This just feels like something that is really sturdy and robust. Partly also because even though this blade stock is not terribly thick, it comes to a relatively thick behind the edge grind. This is thick all the way down to the bottom, so there's robust meat all the way up to this tip. And I think it only comes to about 25 thousandths behind the edge for this, which means it's not a great slicing knife, but it is good at kind of pushing through heavier things. This is a knife that I can also use with gloves on. This jimping is kind of aggressive and rough for my taste, but with gloves it works fine. So if I'm ever out in the backyard doing landscaping work or something like that, this is usually the knife I pull. Otherwise, this doesn't really get a lot of use, even though it is incredibly fun to fidget with. So sometimes I do just sit there and play with it, but otherwise it doesn't do a lot of cutting tasks. Something that does get a ton of cutting tasks, and is the first one on our list, this is the TRM Neutron. The TRM Neutron is basically just the smaller version of the Atom, and so this one is the one that fits my particular hands better. But in general, this is kind of the perfect slicing knife in my mind. The thin lightness means that it fits in the pocket super easily, so this gets a fair amount of pocket time, but this blade, with the .09 blade stock, this pretty darn tall, nearly full flat grind, and this wonderful edge they have on this, means that this is just perfect for slicing. And the vast majority of my cutting tasks that aren't just box opening, but even those are slicing tasks. And this is just so damn good at this, especially if you're trying to push through something firmer, something like foam or something where it's dense, because those types of tasks, you really want this really thin blade stock because anything bigger, thicker will just kind of wedge. And so especially for things like that, this is my go-to. But where that lends to next is this guy. Now this is the TRM Shadow, and this came up in my 5 Knives That Make Me Happy video. The reason why I'm picking out this one is because this one gets used all the freaking time for any time that I need a little bit more grip with that slicing, which is every single time I take recycling out. This is absolutely my go-to recycling knife, and someone joked with me, my friend Mackenzie joked with me that I should feel a little bit hesitant to tell people that because that seems like a unworthy use for such an impressive knife. But that's the kind of use that I have in my life for it, and I'm telling you what, this is the best cardboard knife I have ever had. It has the exact same thin blade stock, which means you can go through like double wall or even triple wall, really thick cardboard like butter. But this handle and just the rigidity of it and everything in this grip means that you have such an incredibly locked in, firm, excellent handling of this knife when you're going through stuff that as much as I love the Neutron, this is kind of a featherweight knife, and it doesn't feel anywhere near as robust. And so if I'm doing anything where I have to kind of push in, but still really need that slicing edge, this, ooh, I also love playing with this knife. And it's got that kind of like thing that you can do. And so from that side of using, I also just pull this out anytime I want to flick it around. I get this one pretty freaking often. Next up is my quiet carry waypoint. Now the waypoint is honestly probably tied with the drift in terms of which one I grab the most frequently. I don't have the drift out right now. I should have grabbed that. This one gets more pocket time because of the fact that it's just much thinner than the drift, and so it just completely disappears in my pocket. From an EDC carryability standpoint, I think this is the best EDC knife I have ever handled. I think it's fantastic. I also use this knife anytime I'm really cutting a lot of wet things out and about. If I know that I'm going to be near water and cutting things and I might not have the opportunity to dry it off super well, the fact that this is completely unrustable, yeah, I was going to say unrust proof, but that's the opposite. That too makes me want to grab for this knife. But again, 0.09 blade stock, hollow grind. This one I use for cutting tasks where I'm not going in a perfectly straight line. This tall blade here is really great for slicing in a straight path, but the taller blade height means that it doesn't curve around stuff well because the material you're curving through is pushing against this tall thing and it wants to stay in a straight line. That's where this one comes in. Just as slicey, but the thinness here means that it's really good at turning surfaces. So if I need to cut like a specific shape out of something, this is my go-to knife. Next up is my Giant Mouse Riv. Part of the Ace line, the Ace Riv. You'll see that right there, Ace. And honestly, this is maybe my most used knife, period. Because the most common use case I have is box opening, and this also does really, really well for those same slicing tasks. It doesn't do quite as well because the blade stock isn't as thin, and so it doesn't, I mean, it's a little bit more likely to have that kind of wedge feel, but this tall grind and how thin this comes behind the edge means this slices like a dream. But this is just kind of the perfect box opening knife. And honestly, you know, this is a better box opening knife. This is the Spyderco McB, and because of the way this fits in your hand, because of the way that this point angles down, this is actually a better knife for like penetrating the top of a box and pulling. And this is, I like this more for box opening, but this is almost just as good at box opening, and it also has this. Oh, I love that. This has such good flicking action. It is so freaking fun to play with. Whereas this is kind of a pain in the butt to flick. If you have to like really, look at that, I did it, but it's really, really not easy to do. Trying to get your finger in there, this is not a flicky knife. And so having something that works really, really well for my most common use case, that is so freaking fun to flick, and it works more as a general purpose knife. So if I'm going to be doing a bunch of box opening, but also just want something in my pocket all day that I'm going to be walking around, I don't know what I'm going to encounter, this is more likely to go in my pocket. And that brings me to one more knife. This is another one that showed up in my 5 Knives Make a Happy video. This is my chopped Spyderco Smock in 20CV. And this is also an absolutely spectacular box opening knife. This just so darn good at piercing the top and dragging along, and this point means it's great for piercing into like plastic clamshell type packaging too. But lastly, it's just, I play with this knife all the freaking time, and it is so much fun to play with. It is just the most fidgety knife, and that is one of my favorite use cases for knives, is fidgeting with them. And so this one makes that list. What that brings me to, though, is one last honorable mention. I threw it in at the end. I threw this as an honorable mention because it's relatively new, so it hasn't gotten anywhere near as much use as these, but it actually has been getting quite a good bit of use recently. This is the Monterey Bay Knives Slayback in full titanium, and this is just such a fun knife to fidget with, like, and from that sense, it's just incredibly fun, but it has such a dang good piercing tip. This thing is amazing. And so I've been reaching for this way more frequently recently, especially if I need to pierce into a surface like plastic clamshell packaging. It's just really, really good for that. And so if I did this video in, I don't know how many months, I bet you that this one, or actually I just ordered a flipper, the flipper version of this, which is locking, that one might get in there instead. It won't have this kind of fidgetiness, but it might, just the fact that it's a locking knife makes it a little bit more usable. I did actually cut myself with this knife because, well, you can use non-locking knives like this to cut on a surface, even with a kind of pushing utility cut, as long as you're staying on a surface when you get off of the material cutting. I was just being dumb and not paying attention to what I was doing and forgot that this is what this knife was. And so I was cutting along the edge of a surface where my knife went off the edge of like a table almost, and my downward pressure that I was using to push meant this flipped close right on my finger. Anyway, ending on that note, I'm supposed to tag people now. And I honestly have no idea who's already been tagged by this. Like, I haven't seen a huge number of these in the ones that I've subscribed to, but when I went through and tried to figure out who I might tag, a lot of those people I found have already been tagged, even though they haven't done a video yet. So what I decided to do is to tag a couple of the slightly smaller channels that I subscribe to. And so the first one I'm going to tag is Corey, half of Casual EDC again. He finally put out his 5 Knives That Make Him Happy video, and I absolutely loved watching it. He's just an awesome guy. Go watch his videos, go sub it. I can't wait to see how he thinks about user knives in that sense. The next is a guy named Jeffrey. He used to go by Geo EDC, but these days I think he's 2G Flicks. I love his videos. They're some of the most like well-researched and well-edited videos. He has a great sense of humor, and the quality of the video he's putting out is just way higher than something like I do. The next is Michael over at Sharpened Blade. He also just has a really great sense of humor, and I think the way that he thinks about knives really, really just clicks well with me. And the last one is a totally new channel to me. His name is Corey, and his channel is called The Practical Blade. And I just learned this guy existed because he left a whole bunch of comments on my videos about how much he identified with the way that I thought about things and described stuff. And so I clicked over on his channel, and I feel the same way, bud. I love your videos. I love the way you think about stuff. He has several of these kind of just like thoughts about the community videos. And yeah, the guy is great. Go sub his channel. This was really fun to make, and I feel, again, like I've been talking a mile a minute. I have no idea if this is going to turn out, but thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks.